Welcome to the Recruitment Equation, the no-nonsense podcast where we get real about what it takes to succeed in talent acquisition. We're diving into the world of recruitment, the wins, the challenges, and everything in between. From innovative strategies to unfiltered conversations with industry leaders, we're here to give you the insights you need to elevate the way you attract and hire. This episode is supported by Beyond Talents and Develop Diverse, your partner for future-proof talent attraction. Let's get started. Wonderful. Welcome to the Recruitment Equation. We're having another episode of this wonderful podcast. With me, I have Heidi Sini. Welcome, Heidi.
Thank you.
And my wonderful co-host, Nicklas.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that we're doing this.
Likewise.
Heidi, I've really been looking forward to this episode, both because I know you and all the expertise and knowledge that you have, but I could cite your whole CV, but maybe it's for the listener, it's more interesting to hear yourself, just introduce yourself. So Heidi, who are you?
Who am I? Oh, that was a big question. But if we just talk about like the professional side of it,
you decide.
I think that I usually describe myself as having like a three-legged stool. So I have a communications leg that's really from my educational background. I have a strategic and like a business focus from when I was a product manager. And then, of course, the last 16 years of HR, where my primary focus has been on talent acquisition. And by this, I mean actual talent acquisition, which I'm sure is something we'll talk more about later today. But really about figuring out how can you find the best people to the companies that you're a part of.
Wonderful.
It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
I would be that short and precise. I'll practice that. But Heidi, you've also worked, of course, as both head of TA partner, and in a lot of different parts in a company. And I think the way that I know you, at least, and Nicklas, you can, of course, join in, you are extremely both well-connected, but you also extremely aware of what's happening in the market, both in Denmark, in the little space that we're in here, but more importantly, maybe what's going on globally and what are the trends. And so that is what we're going to talk about today. Yeah. It's a lot about the trends that we see, specifically within TA, both in terms of technology, but also just in general. So what trends are you mostly excited about right now?
I think that there are two things that I'm excited about, and one of them is definitely like if you look at Denmark, I think that one trend, and I hesitate to almost to call it a trend, but I'm hoping it is going to be a trend, is really people talking much more about how to recruit unbiased, how to get rid of the application, and behold, maybe also the CV. If we're really, really daring. So just thinking more and more a little bit towards skill-based hiring, I think is a trend that's coming. But right now, just thinking about unbiased, fair recruitment. And the second thing, if we look at it a little bit more globally, I think is really much about how to use AI agents to optimize, effectivize, create a better candidate experience, be more efficient in TA. I think those are a couple of the trends that I see out there.
And again, as we know, you are both, of course, aware of Denmark, but you are one of the few in the TA space that actually has a network outside of our very little country.
Yeah, true.
So
it's hard to build.
What do you see as the big difference between the conversations going on, especially in the UK, in the US? Compare, in the talent acquisition space and with those people compared to the conversations going on in Denmark.
Yeah, I think that's actually why I kind of divided a little bit between what's going on in Denmark and what's going on in the UK and the US, because like the difference between what I see, the difference between Denmark and UK is kind of like the difference between UK and the US. There is just such a massive difference between the maturity of the organizations and how they work. And then at the same time, they face the same challenges that we do. So some of the chat, as you know, I'm part of the All 100, Resourcing Leaders 100, and we have a WhatsApp group, and a lot of the chat that goes on there is very comparable to some of the chat that I see go on in Denmark. But I do think that the majority of difference is really how mature they are around it. So in Denmark, we're talking about, could it be a good idea to use recruitment unbiased? Whereas in other places, it's like a given. You have to do that. It's just a matter of how do you then do it.
Yeah.
Where I feel we're still in the should we even do it?
Yeah.
And then, of course, with the whole rollback of DEI in the States, I mean, that's a whole different matter, and that's on the agenda a lot as well.
But would it be okay if we actually talked about that? Because that is a huge thing, when a country like that, in the global market has a leader who is rolling back DEI. What do you see? How will this affect?
But it's already
in recruitment.
affected.
Yeah. What do you think it will do to our industry and to recruitment as a whole?
I think one thing that I just want to stress, like, I completely respect whatever people may think or not think about this situation, because it is something that's highly sensitive. But if I were to take a step back in terms of maybe some things in the States had gotten a little bit too far in terms of how they had to recruit or demonstrate the way they recruit or document the way they recruit, etc. So I think that it's a little bit hard to kind of put an equal between what was going on with DEI in the States versus what's going on with DEI in Denmark. But then it is already affecting us in a global sense, because companies that are working with U.S. companies have to sign a waiver that they're not doing any DEI initiatives. And for a country to go out and require that, not from a company basis, but from a country basis, is unheard of. And I'm not even sure we have seen the effect of it yet still. I think it's going to continue for a while, and then it's going to go rolling back. And for sure, it's always like that. It goes one direction and it goes the other direction, and then it kind of lands in the middle. And I think that is the journey that they're going through. But I think the way that it's going to affect is that there are simply things you can't do anymore. There are things you can't talk about anymore. There are things you cannot progress with anymore. And there are things that you have to deal with differently. A lot of the tech that we see is coming out or was coming out from the States. And for that tech to be hit this hard as well, they will have to have different sales parameters to be used instead of what they did before, I think.
Agree, definitely, right? But we have also seen the ups and downs in the past, right? I think maybe we focus so much on that right now, but I think also sometimes in Europe, in my perspective at least, is that we forget that US was so different, right? It was actually talking about it, dealing with it in a very different way than what I have seen we have done, both in Denmark, but also in Europe and the UK for that matter, right?
Yeah.
So just putting D&I and treating it as if it was the same, I also think that it's a misunderstanding, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So the adjustment might be a good thing, but of course, right now, getting people to sign waivers, all that, we can always discuss positive, negative. I know my view on that, right? But I still see that a lot of companies are not stopping their work, in my experience, unless
they're just doing it differently.
Exactly.
Yeah. And they're, it is silly because a lot of it is just common sense.
Yeah.
But I still think that there is this group of people that, for some reason, still believe that DEI is not about finding the best candidate.
Yeah.
That it's about that somehow they think it's about finding the best underrepresented candidate and not just the best candidate. And for me, it's incomprehensible that you don't understand the difference and see all that science and all that data that is behind it, that you still don't believe it just because it hasn't happened to you.
Yeah. And could you elaborate on that? Because I think
there's a discussion going on right now on LinkedIn that I really tried to stay out of it because I was like, no. But there is a discussion going on right now. Let's just say, so Joe the Juice very boldly went out and did a whole back to office. So if we look at data, or at least the data that I have seen, some of the things that can help diversity is flexible working. So when you require a whole group of people to be constantly in the office 5 days a week within office hours, that is going to have an impact on diversity. So that led to a discussion around DEI on one of the threads that I was following on LinkedIn. And there was this one, I don't even know if he was a troll or if he just wanted to be against everybody else. But there was this whole like, no, but I have had, global experience and I've worked with this many companies and I've never seen, and it's all about just finding the best candidate. And I'm like, but the best candidate, you don't get the best candidate when you have conditions that don't serve the majority of people. I don't understand how it is so difficult to see.
But I think sometimes, and we know, we've all worked with this space, of course, but, the thing that I sometimes resonates for me is that I've heard other people quote is whatever sort of benefits the underrepresented groups often also benefits the majority groups.
Exactly.
Right?
So it's common sense.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. And it's not only underrepresented groups. It's a whole. If we just take that example again, with because I think it is also one of the trends that we're seeing is that more companies globally, but also in Denmark, are trying to get people back in the office because they believe that that's the only way to keep culture. And I think that by doing that, you are not only making it hard for underrepresented people, but you're making it hard for everybody except a very, very small margin that has their office first at heart or has the job first at heart. There is parents as a whole because they want perhaps more work-life balance. There's even young people that want something outside of work. So it's not a generational thing. And I know that you've been talking about that too, Nicklas, and I completely agree. We should stop talking about what is generations because it's really about humans and people in all kinds of ages and all kinds of phases of life have different needs. But if you narrow that down to a very, very specific, very narrow-minded thinking, you're not going to get the majority of the talent. You can do it for a while because your brand is popular. The market is hard right now, maybe to find a job for some people, but we still have to remember hard, and Denmark is still a 2.6 unemployment rate. So, when I came out, it was 9.6. So it's just, we just have to put it into, a comparison.
But one thing I'm curious about is that, you're one of the people that I know that for the longest time have both talked about, but also actually experimented with and implemented anonymization in the screening process, using actual screening questions, cases or whatever. But even though this has been going on, we don't see anything in the market right now moving. We don't see a bigger representation of specific demographics. That is one of the things I really was curious about. That is, a lot of the numbers from 2024 is showing that we're not moving ahead. We're not moving forward as Denmark, as a country. We're not seeing...
On the leadership, what, are you talking leadership? You're talking...
We're on all levels. And we're both talking gender, representation.
It goes backwards, actually.
It's actually going backwards.
Unless the public sector. The public sector has actually gone forward. So Equalis is the think tank here on diversity and inclusion. They're doing some really cool analysis on this. And on the public sector, they've been better.
Okay, that's interesting.
Not in the private.
Not in the private, and that's where I'm just curious, Heidi, for someone who's seen this and talked about this for so many years. What do you think we're doing wrong in Denmark when we have all this discussion in TA about anonymization and skill-based hiring and so on, and we're still not seeing like us as a country moving?
And I think if I knew the answer, I would probably be able to work really well as a consultant. But I think some of the things are that when we look at the leadership that's out there, senior leadership, it's kind of like the same people moving around just in different positions. A lot of them, because we know that, are white male in a certain age. And I'm not saying anything against that. I'm just saying it's the same kind of mindset that is being brought around with some people. Then the second thing, one of the things that we're seeing is that when it comes to talent acquisition, talent acquisition and recruitment is being equalized. Like talent acquisition and recruitment is the same thing. It's not, in my view anyway. And because that is the perception of the business and the leadership in the business, they tend to hire junior people even in quite senior roles. And then these junior people come into senior roles and and there's tons of potential, not denying that. There is just something to having done this before and having tried it a number of times before. So you kind of already has done all the rookie mistakes when you need to scale it up to the extent that they need to do it. So they reach out to people who have done it before, who were denied the role in the first place because they were too expensive. And then they're trying to mentor the junior people because the junior people haven't tried this before, and they're fighting against an organization that just view them as recruiters, as somebody who is supposed to fill a role. But it's not about filling a role. It's about building the right company. And until you understand the difference between filling a role and building a company and building the talent in the company, until you prioritize it and put the budget there, it's not going to change, I think. And I don't think that that's going to change until the next generation of people who hopefully maybe have had mentors that could show them a different way of recruiting can actually come to the next seat. And I think it's going to happen within the next maybe 5-7 years, I'm hoping. There's going to be a mindset change in senior leadership.
Yeah.
But do we just need to wait around then for the next 5 years?
I'm
I'm not a very patient person.
No, you're not.
For people who know
You
me,
wouldn't wait 5 minutes.
I think that
I'll go
there's.
broke.
I mean, it depends on how talent is moving, right? Because the funny thing is that the companies that are doing things in one certain way that maybe is not the most fair, unbiased process is mostly also the companies complaining about why they can't find the talent. So until that becomes a pain point hard enough for them, it doesn't necessitate a change. So it's like the burning platform, right? Something needs to change, and unless there's a burning platform, they don't really need to change because everything is going fine. But that's because they see the narrow picture. They don't see what they could have gotten or
the
what
blinders.
Exactly, yeah. So I think it's going to come from different angles. You're seeing more and more candidates react to a bad candidate experience. There was a post yesterday from somebody on LinkedIn where a candidate had been quite rude to her because she hadn't gotten a well enough feedback, the candidate felt. And that's not something you would have seen a couple of years ago. And you're seeing more and more people talk about the job searching journey and getting traction on it. I had a conversation just last week about somebody who told me that when that person, when they were applying, I think they had applied for more than 150 roles, and about, I think 60% of them, they were ghosted. And I think that is going to create a pushback for change.
So is that a trend?
That is a trend also, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is because they can afford it right now.
Yeah.
But the thing is, candidates don't forget. And we saw it during Corona. The companies that struggled to hire after Corona were also the companies that treated their employees the worst during Corona. But if you look, so it's
Funny
just
enough,
going to come. Yeah, it's
it
just
comes
going to.
back.
Yeah.
Karma.
But we talked about this
karma.
before,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely think so. So I think that there's a structural thing when you're talking about like why does that change not happen, and then I think there's also, unfortunately, I mean, there's no TA, there's no talent acquisition education, there's hardly any courses you can really do. There's no there's like one network in the entirety of Denmark for talent acquisition people. There's nothing for senior people yet in Denmark. That will come, but yet. And that's why I like, where should you get that knowledge?
Yeah.
If you don't have the time to constantly keep up to date and to try to understand and see examples and hear examples from other companies, how should you then gain that knowledge?
And maybe more importantly for juniors who are
Yeah,
starting their career.
Exactly.
How are you supposed to know, and how are you supposed to make the transformation that we're asking for here?
Yeah.
Because there's so little both knowledge out there, data available.
Like how many of the people who are sitting and leading TA roles today know how to make a business case? Very few. How many of those that are here today can explain the business strategy and the business focus as well as they can the TA? Few. And until they understand that being in that role is very, very much about business. It's not about, HR. It's about a business. I think we're not going to see the change because you won't get senior leadership to listen to you unless and until you can argue or at least demonstrate business acumen.
Do you know of any companies that really does it well? Someone who's actually on the forefront, not necessarily in Denmark, but just, some TA teams or any TA leaders or someone where you say, when you listen or when you look for, your inspiration, you look for these people or these companies.
I mean, I think what the Sebastian was doing for Joe and the Juice just before he left is really, really interesting. I was very curious about that. I think that's definitely some of the better things that we've seen in Denmark, for sure. I think Pandora has been a little bit under the radar in what they're doing, but I mean, they're doing a pretty good job as well, as far as I know, because I kind of started it.
Yeah.
And then if you look internationally, there's really been one ever since I met her. She used to work for Kiosk Group in the UK, which is not really a company, but it's a huge. I think there are like 30,000 people or something.
Okay.
They work very much in construction, and what they had done for example, people coming out of prison, they had a whole prison program. They had for like prior convicted. They had a program for veterans. They had like all the different things that they did for people who would otherwise be completely lost. So they made an impact not only like from a TA perspective, but from a society perspective. And there's also somebody else who's called Radical, who's really been focusing their energy on trying to get people who are outside the work market into the work market. And I think like there's actually also, I think, but he doesn't really work in TA, but the whole work with veteran groups in Denmark is something we could utilize way, way more than we are. There are so many veterans out there that could be helped into the work market in a different way, I believe. People who've, defended our country and suffered PTSD on top of that, or have other challenges coming back, going from a war and then trying to fit into a society. And then there are other groups of people, but we don't, and even like within prison, like why are we not looking more into the potential of people who are maybe misdemeanor or maybe not that serious crimes and try to get them in particularly youth? There are so many things that we could do. There are service businesses that are struggling to find people. There are construction businesses that are struggling to find people. We know handy workers are, that whole business. Why are we not thinking more outside the box? And I think that we are not because this is Denmark. It's jantelov, it's traditions, it's let's not rock the boat.
But I think also there might be another aspect, right? So if we just continue within the TA space, we also, underlying saying there are other operating models, right? HR business partners, that kind of stuff, right? But in what I hear sometimes, because I'm also out talking to many companies, a lot of TA teams, that are so busy in their daily operations that it's so hard to keep up with the trends and difficult to find time to prioritize that strategic work, implementation, the change that a lot, in my experience, there's still a knowledge, there's a wish to do things better, to want to do things, to want to implement whatever AI, whatever trend, or to be more sort of inclusive to different groups. But the time is simply not there, is often the argument, right? Is that something you see as well? And is that argument valid? And how do we change that?
I think it's definitely valid.
You've been
in
I know
some
you've been running
sorts.
many teams, right? So
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. I think it's valid in some sorts. But unless it's kind of like
In the egg kind of
yeah,
thing.
exactly. It's kind of like hen and the egg, because if you don't take time to do it, you're never gonna get time to do it. Because if you don't take that step back and do the business case on what is the average of what you could be recruiting, and this is the workload, and this is the percentage that your recruiters is constantly overworked, you're never gonna get the attention of the business. And you're just going to be in the mud all day. And until we have people who, in the more senior positions, who also understand the concept between recruitment and talent acquisition, or at least have somebody educate them on it from TA, it's hard to get them out of there. But I think it's you have to kind of want it as well.
Yeah.
You have to want it, and you have to fight for it. And it doesn't come. It's not something that's going to be handed to you.
Yeah.
You have to really do that extra work and prioritize it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, no matter what job I've always had, I've always prioritized network. And I've always prioritized my learning and my insight into the trade, because I believe if I am to be the best possible for that position, it is my duty. And if the company will not give that to me, then I will seek it elsewhere. So sometimes it's been part of my job to do that and keep up with it. And sometimes it's been what I did in my free time. And even with twins, I still find myself at, 10 o'clock in the evening before I go to bed, following LinkedIn, reading a LinkedIn article, or doing a comment on this, or doing that, or when I wake up at, 5 in the morning or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I just simply cannot not do it.
Yeah. But then it's interesting enough to say, then, do we wait for the leadership who we just agreed that they had to be changed, right? So in 5-7 years, this change can come, right? Or do we create a revolution from the bottom up?
I think
we have a platform here.
I think it goes
It's
both ways. Yeah, I think it goes both ways. You need to have some role models.
Yeah.
You need to have somebody who can kind of show you the way.
Yeah.
And I think you also need to. I'm seeing, I'm really impressed, the last couple of years, what's been happening in the TA scene, to be quite honest. I see a lot of great potential out there. But I also see that you kind of lose breath or momentum because it is such a fight uphill at times that you just kind of grow tired. And one of the things that we are seeing over the last couple of years, at least the last year, is really also that teams are being asked to deliver more with less resources. And that's a huge challenge.
Yeah.
Because it is really getting cut back to minimum. And I think part of the reason for that is, again, if you cannot show, if you don't do, for example, workforce planning, and you don't have the experience that tells you that, yes, any company I've been in that said, oh, we don't expect to hire anybody next year. Okay, what is the retention percentage? Okay, so that's people you're going to hire for sure, right? And do we think that we're not going to grow at all? Okay, then that's the minimum. But then put 10 or 20% on top of that, because it's always going to come. I have never in my career ever experienced a company going, oh, we're not going to recruit next year, to not recruiting anybody. And that is experience. So unless you know that, it's not going to, help you. And then if you don't do the workforce planning, you're going to be undersourced, and you're going to struggle to fill the roles, and you're going to struggle to do any kind of the fun things.
Because you're always behind.
Exactly.
Right? Because you never planned.
Yeah. And then also show, if you don't show the data, if you don't, most of the majority, even if the company doesn't require a strategy from you, make a strategy, make your own strategy. Make your own goals if the company don't require it from you, but still have what are the things where you are measurably doing a difference for the company? Where are you helping them? Save money or make money? And I can assure you, if you can show the company that you will help them save millions, or you will help them earn millions by doing tweaks that won't cost them a lot upfront, they will start to listen.
And quantifying that, I think it's because even if you don't bring sales into the organization, you're still business critical. and it's fairly, I won't say easy because it's not true, but you can show that because there is data on this.
That's one of the reasons why I love TA, because I came from being a product manager where it's all about show me the money. And it's like you couldn't launch. And I remember like one of the first like moments in my career was when my manager asked me like, so how much do you expect to earn on this product? And I was like, I don't know. It's never been launched before. And like nobody in Denmark has it. So how should I know that? And his answer was just like, well, if you can't tell me, I'll find somebody who can. And I'll be like, okay, well, I'll figure it out. And I came up with a number like anybody else did, you know? And I think that has really taught me, like, really think, you have to think of some kind of return on investment on what you do and show that and show the metrics. And that's what I love coming into TA. And I also recall, like, when I first came into HR, we're rolling out a big program and it cost millions in leadership. And I was like, so how do you measure the return on investment? You can't do that. It's HR. But I think at least we're a little bit past that we can
think
do
so.
it. Yeah.
But it's true. I also saw that some years ago. But I hope that's a trend that I hope.
Yeah.
Of course, unconscious bias. That's a given, obviously, in my business. But I think the data-driven part, I would really love to see that more and more. I think it is growing, but I think really looking for that data, really looking to make decisions based on data, not that gut feeling. Throughout the funnel, throughout.
Yeah. The last survey I saw stated that, like, I think it was it 83% or 93% of CEOs' decisions were gut feeling. And it's like, so, and I think it's like, it's really scary. But I think you cannot get around. So what I usually say to hiring managers or people is like, don't forget the gut feeling. Just make sure you have data to support it. And data is all the things that you can gather around that to support it, even in evaluating candidates or selecting candidates or doing a business case or doing the metrics for your business case.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Are there any, maybe that's for all of us, any trends or buzzwords that we could live without?
I actually think I want to go in the other direction.
Okay.
No, but I'm more and more focused on not taking talking to the 5 or 10% most geeky TA people about how do we, take it to the next level, but actually, taking all those, those 80% of TA people out there, and a lot of recruitment going on is not by specialists. It's HR managers who are all alone. They are doing recruitment and onboarding and Christmas parties. So how can we actually take all of those recruitment processes and just make them go from posting and praying to actually doing pretty good recruitment and TA. So it's just to say that I would love to partner up and say, why don't you go and take some of the pretty okay companies in Denmark and then make them world class, and then let's see if we can also take some of the people. A trend for me would be how to take the SMBs, the backbone of Denmark, and then just teach them how to do fundamentals, like pretty okay recruitment, instead of only doing posting and praying. That would be. And
when you say it's a trend, is that something you see is happening more, and how? How are companies doing that more or investing in?
Yeah, I don't see it happening.
Okay. So it's a trend you would like to see.
I would really love to see, the TA community helping non-TAs doing recruitment, learning the fundamentals.
And HR business partner, hiring managers.
Yes, and again, mostly like HR Karen, HR Fleming, sitting there doing the best they can. But they are covering the entire HR, palette of disciplines. They are doing 30 different things, and recruitment is one on the list of the many.
But this is also where tech stack comes in, right?
I was just about to say that.
I mean, this is really where if you had a proper ATS, at least start there.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like glorious or expensive or SAP, God forbid it. But just a decent ATS will get you a long way. Yeah. There are some really good ATSs out there, both local Danish and international ATSs that will get you a very long way because they have so many things embedded already. So that will take you a very, very long way. ChatGPT will take you a very, very long way. Poetry for a little bit larger companies.
Poetry?
Poetry is the new invention from Adam Gordon, who also was behind Candidate ID, that was later sold to iCIMS. So poetry is recruitment enablement, and it is the coolest thing I've seen in years. And basically, I didn't really understand recruitment enablement or recruiter enablement until I really came into it. But what it does is, for example, you can put in your brand, you can put in your tone of voice, your templates, etc. Put that in as the basic of the content, and then let's say you need to recruit a software engineer, and if you don't have anything at all, it will use AI or machine learning to create a decent job posting, but it will do more than that. It will, within few minutes, create, I think it's more than 30 different pieces of content for you. It could be outreach messages. It could be the string that you need to source. It can be the job posting. It can be a PowerPoint presentation for the hiring manager. It can be something for the candidate. It creates all this content within minutes that you can then use and then make it more professional for you if you don't have the time or the resources to do it. At least that will take you a little step further.
Cool.
But it's still within the strategy. You still have to have that, vision with that, right? Because it's still, I think, can be really powerful because it's contextualized to whatever hiring you're doing, something like poetry or other tools. But it's still only prompts that it's doing, right? So it's generative AI, something like poetry. It's generative AI prompting, and they're using ChatGPT, open model, or their own sort of course, it's not open in that way, but they're using OpenAI as the foundational model, and then prompting, right? Yeah. So we still need to make sure that we're asking it to do something that we can prompt it towards, and we cannot just only rely on tech doing everything. I think there still has to be a wish or a pain. Yeah. You also talked about it, Heidi, right? A pain that we need to solve, and then we plan the tech stack from there.
Completely agree. But it's not only the tech stack. It's like, what is it that you're trying to solve? Start with that, and then don't. And that's also one thing that I preach is like, tech cannot solve a human problem. So unless you have a process that is, at least design your process so you know what it is, and just keep that in the business. So that's one thing you can do. You can start by understanding what is the pain point, what is it that we're trying to solve. Okay, next second thing, what tools do we need to help do that? And then what is the process that we need to do that? And then a few of the things like measure it. If you don't measure it, then it's hard to really see the difference that you make. And even in small companies, I believe that is something that shockingly is still not being done. So I think that if we were to raise the 80% as well as the top 20 or whatever it is really much about measuring what you do and being sure that whatever you do is your pain point, but also that your basics is in place. Because until your basics is in place, it doesn't really make sense to work with anything else. Mm-hmm.
And then we're going back to trends, because then we still, of course, need to be aware of what trends is going on, what is happening. Of course, still having the basics and everything there. Are there any any other trends that we're missing here?
We talked minimizing bias. Removing cover letter and CV. We've talked AI. Yeah. Any other?
Yeah, I definitely see there's something going. There's a couple of things, actually. I think that there's something about salary transparency.
Yes.
That is really, really going to hit us hard, because I don't think that people are ready for it. We're not ready for it in two ways. One way, internally, because there is such a huge difference within the companies, and we're not ready for it externally, because we don't want to tell people what the salary range is. Like for the past year, when people have been asking me, for example, about the salary range, if I was looking for something, I would just turn it around and say, you know this role. What have you thought about the salary band to be? And nobody really had a clear answer. And if they did, they definitely did not want to disclose it. And I think that is so interesting. Why are we so... Yeah. So I think salary transparency is definitely something.
Agree.
Then I think a trend that is going to happen more in Denmark also is what Joe and the Juice just did. Back in the office.
Getting people back to the office.
Back to the office because they, for some reason, believe that that's the only way to create culture. And to be together as a team. And I just do not, I have to say this, I just do not understand how, for example, I have never had a team that was located in the same place. I've always had teams that were dispersed all over the world, or, even just in Jutland and Copenhagen or Australia, whatever it could be. But we still had a pretty good team. And we still had a pretty good culture. And we still managed to work together despite hours of time difference and location and everything else. So why is it that we believe that the only way that we can create and be together is physically in the office? I just do not understand it. But yeah, that's a whole other subject.
That's for another episode.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
But we have run out of time.
We're running out of time.
Yeah,
Oh my
but
gosh.
that
was fast.
You need one last question for Heidi.
I do. But first, actually, Nicklas, for you, is there any trends? Now I want to ask the question. Any trends you wish would go away? Or buzzwords?
Trends that I wish would go away?
Yeah. Any trends that you've seen that you wish wasn't a trend?
Weren't a trend?
Weren't a trend?
I have one.
Good. Okay, then maybe you go first, Heidi.
Stop calling recruitment talent acquisition.
Sharp.
Yeah.
As ever. Nicklas?
No, not really. Not that I can think of anything where I've been like, stop talking about this. No.
Generations.
Yeah, but don't get me started. So let's talk. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering. The last question, Heidi, because we ran out of time a while ago. So the last question, because we could really keep on going all day. That is no lie. This podcast is called the Recruitment Equation.
Yeah.
So we've established that it's not straightforward always to sort of follow trends and just do always what sounds right in this conversation. Say, oh, you should just do that and that. But the equation of actually, of course, running your TA team, but also keeping up with trends and being at the forefront of what's happening and everything. What are the pillars and building blocks for that?
For me, it's really about understanding the business, understanding the pain points, and build your function. If you are the leader, build the function to support that. Yeah. It's all about the business. And then show the value through that, I would say.
Wonderful. I love it. We've run out of time. And we are... I only want to say thank you. I really enjoyed this episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Pete.